Major Glenn Miller, director of the U.S. Air Force Band, is missing on a flight from England to Paris, it was announced today.
The mysterious disappearance of legendary band leader Glenn Miller during World War II has baffled the world for decades. Speculations and theories have ranged from a tragic accident to espionage or something even darker. Despite the myths surrounding Glenn's flight, his plane has recently been found, adding a new layer to this long-standing mystery.
Miller gave up his lucrative career and enlisted in the military, where he led the U.S. Army Air Force Band.
From his musical beginnings to the secret missions that may have played a role, join us in this video as we unveil what was discovered in Glenn Miller's plane 80 years later. We will delve into solving this historic mystery and uncover the final moments of Glenn's life that have been hidden for decades. Before we delve into his final flight, let's revisit his early beginnings and rise to stardom. Early life of Glenn Miller. Born as Alton Glenn Miller in Clarinda, Iowa, the famous band leader decided to use the name Glenn with a double N during high school. This change wasn't just a personal preference. It had legal and military significance throughout his life. Official documents, like his military records, driver's license, and tax returns listed him as Alton G. Miller. Miller's journey into music began early. After saving money from milking cows, he purchased his first trombone and joined the town orchestra in Grant City, Missouri. Although he also played the cornet and mandolin, the trombone became his primary instrument. In 1918, the Miller family relocated to Fort Morgan, Colorado, where Glenn attended high school. He was a well-rounded student, excelling in sports like football and serving as an editor for the school yearbook for 2 years. His name appeared both as Glenn and Glenn in these yearbooks, reflecting the evolving nature of his identity. By the time he graduated in 1921, Miller was focused on a professional music career. He had already experienced the thrill of performing and was determined to pursue music as his lifelong career. He was unaware at the time that his musical journey would make him one of the most renowned bandleaders in history. In 1923, Miller enrolled at the University of Colorado at Boulder and joined the Sigma Nu fraternity. However, his passion for music often led him away from academics. He spent much of his time attending auditions and playing gigs with various bands, including Boyd Centers in Denver. Struggling with most of his classes, particularly in harmony, Miller realized that music was his true calling. He decided to leave college and focus entirely on his music career. How then did he rise to stardom, and what is the reason for his mysterious disappearance? Also, where was his plane found, and what does it reveal? Keep watching to find out. Glenn's musical career. Miller's career began to take shape when he moved to New York City, where he immersed himself in the Schillinger system of music composition and arrangement. Under the guidance of Joseph Schillinger, Miller created Miller's Tune, which was later renamed Moonlight Serenade. This piece became his hallmark, capturing his unique musical style. In 1926, Miller started touring with various bands, eventually joining Ben Pollack's orchestra in Los Angeles. He also played with Victor Young, learning from some of the top musicians of the time. Initially, Miller was the main trombone soloist, but his role diminished when the talented Jack Teagarden joined the band. This setback made Miller realize that his true strength lay in arranging and composing music rather than just performing. He even published a songbook in 1928 called 125 Jazz Breaks for Trombone, highlighting his skill in arranging music for his instrument. During his time with Pollack's band, Miller composed several arrangements, including his first composition, Room 1411, co-written with the rising jazz star Benny Goodman. In 1928, after moving to New York City, Miller reunited with his college sweetheart Helen Berger, and they got married. He then joined Red Nichols' orchestra, known as Red Nichols, and his 5 Pennies. In this group, he played in the pit bands for Broadway shows such as Strike Up the Band and Girl Crazy, alongside other notable musicians like Benny Goodman and Gene Krupa. Miller's career was on the rise as he became a sought-after arranger and composer. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, Glenn Miller was busy freelancing as a trombonist for various bands. He played with jazz legends like Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, and Joe Venuti. He also wrote and arranged music for the Dorsey brothers, creating popular tunes like Annie's Cousin Fanny and Tomorrow's Another Day. In 1935, Miller had the opportunity to lead an American orchestra for British bandleader Ray Noble. This experience helped him develop his signature sound, which featured a lead clarinet supported by 4 saxophones, a style that would later define his own big band. Miller even appeared in the movie The Big Broadcast of 1936, where he was part of the Ray Noble Orchestra. The film also featured performances by Dorothy Dandridge and the Nicholas brothers, who would later collaborate with Miller on 2 other films. Despite the success from other bands, nothing could beat his own iconic band. How did he form his own musical band? Let's find out. Glenn's musical band and rise to stardom. In 1937, Glenn Miller took a bold step by forming his own band, but things didn't go as planned. The band struggled to distinguish itself from the many others in the music scene, and after a challenging year, it disbanded in 1938. Even Benny Goodman, a legend in the jazz world, encouraged Miller, saying, "I don't know, Glenn, you just stay with it." Despite this setback, Miller was determined not to give up on his musical ambitions. He realized he needed something unique to stand out in a crowded field. So he experimented with a distinctive sound, using a clarinet to play the melody, while a tenor saxophone played the same note an octave lower, and the other saxophones harmonized within a single octave. This innovative approach would become his signature style. Miller discovered a talented saxophonist named Wilbur Schwartz, but instead of having Schwartz play the saxophone, Miller had him play the lead clarinet. This new blend of sounds gave Miller's band a unique edge, distinguishing it from the many other bands of the late 1930s. The distinctive sound of the Glenn Miller Orchestra soon became well-known and recognizable. In a 1939 Metronome interview, Glenn Miller described his band's unique style, highlighting how their use of a clarinet and tenor saxophones set them apart from other bands. By September 1938, the Glenn Miller Orchestra signed with Bluebird Records, leading to a successful performance at the Meadowbrook Ballroom and a major breakthrough at Glen Island Casino. By late 1939, they were a household name with hits like Tuxedo Junction and a record-breaking Carnegie Hall appearance. Their popularity continued with a CBS radio show featuring the Andrews Sisters and a gold record for Chattanooga Choo Choo in 1942, marking their significant place in music history. Apart from music, what other on-screen appearances did Glenn make? Let's find out. Glenn's Filmographic ventures. The Glenn Miller Orchestra's talents went beyond just their music. They also made significant appearances in 2 films produced by 20th Century Fox. The first was Sun Valley Serenade, released in 1941, where the orchestra played a major role. In this film, they performed alongside comedian Milton Berle and delivered a memorable rendition of their hit song Chattanooga Choo Choo. The following year, the band returned to Hollywood for another film, Orchestra Wives, released in 1942. This musical comedy drama depicted the lives of the musicians and their spouses while on tour. The film featured a young Jackie Gleason in a supporting role as the band's bassist, adding a humorous touch to the story. The Glenn Miller Orchestra was also scheduled to appear in a third film with Fox, titled Blind Date. However, plans for this film were disrupted when Miller decided to enlist in the U.S. Army. As a result, Blind Date was never produced. Despite this, the two films they did make highlight the band's versatility and their influence on popular culture. What were some of the criticisms and controversies surrounding his musical career? Stay tuned as we unveil these details. Glenn's reception. Although Glenn Miller's music was widely loved by the public, it faced criticism from some jazz experts. Many critics felt that Miller's band's sound was too polished and repetitive, lacking the spontaneity and improvisation typically associated with jazz. They argued that Miller seemed to prioritize commercial success over artistic integrity. Miller's response to these critiques was straightforward. "I don't want a jazz band." He focused on giving his audience what they wanted with precision and reliability. Critics like Doug Ramsey contended that Miller's approach was formulaic and lacked depth and originality. However, not all jazz critics dismissed Miller's work. Gunther Schuller and Gary Giddens defended him, noting that his music had a unique charm that deeply resonated with listeners. Giddens even likened Moonlight Serenade to a Pavlovian trigger, suggesting it had a powerful emotional impact on its audience. While Schuller admitted that Miller's sound wasn't flawless, criticizing some of the vocal performances, he also acknowledged Miller's ambition and drive. Schuller believed that Miller's musical legacy might have been even more significant if he hadn't died so young. The debate about Glenn Miller's contributions to music continues. Some view him as a commercial sellout, while others see him as a visionary who transformed the big band sound. Regardless of individual opinions, it is clear that Miller made a substantial impact on popular music and remains one of the most cherished band leaders in history and in the military. How did he get into the military and what was his tenure like? Let's find out. Glenn's service in military. In 1942, at the height of his civilian success, Glenn Miller made a surprising choice to join the armed forces, leaving behind a lucrative $20,000 per week income. At 38, married, and needing glasses, he was an unlikely draft candidate. After his Navy application was rejected due to a scandal unrelated to him, Miller turned to the Army. His proposal to modernize military music caught the attention of General Brian Somerville, leading to his commission. Miller bid farewell to his civilian career with emotional broadcasts, including his final performance at the Central Theater in Passaic, New Jersey. On October 7, 1942, he reported for duty as a captain in the Army Specialist Corps. After training, he was transferred to the Army Air Forces, AAF, by General Henry Hap Arnold. Miller initially worked to boost troop morale through music and was later assigned to the AAF Technical Training Command in North Carolina, where he led the 2nd AAF Radio Production Unit and Orchestra. His goal was to blend jazz, popular, and classical music to entertain and inspire. The 1st AAF Radio Production Unit and Orchestra in Hollywood set the stage for Glenn Miller's innovative approach to military music. His unit's weekly radio show, I Sustain the Wings, combined jazz, popular, and classical music, boosting morale among troops and civilians. They recorded V-discs and produced broadcasts for the Office of War Information and Armed Forces Radio Service. The versatile Glenn Miller AAF Training Command Band included a concert orchestra, marching band, and jazz band led by Ray McKinley. Despite initial resistance, the AAF supported Miller's fresh approach. In May 1944, General Eisenhower requested Miller's unit for Europe to aid in broadcasting and morale as D-Day neared. They sailed to London on the RMS Queen Elizabeth and were later moved to Bedford for safety. A V-1 bomb struck their old location in Chelsea on July 3rd, killing over 100. But Miller's band had already relocated, reinforcing his belief in Miller luck. Continued success of Glenn's musical career. On July 9th, Glenn Miller's 51-piece orchestra began broadcasting a series of musical programs over the Allied Expeditionary Forces Program, AEFP, with technical support from the BBC. These broadcasts featured the full orchestra as well as smaller jazz quartets and piano solos, showcasing the diverse talents of Miller's band. The orchestra also appeared on the Voice of America's European outlet, reaching audiences in occupied Europe and Germany. One of their most unique programs was Music for the Wehrmacht, designed specifically for German soldiers. In this show, Miller made announcements in phonetic German, with help from Ilse, a German-speaking announcer who was actually an American broadcaster named Gloria Wagner. Additionally, Sergeant Johnny Desmond sang in German, adding authenticity to the broadcast. The Glenn Miller Orchestra was highly sought after, performing at various American air bases to boost troop morale. Their radio shows gained even more popularity with guest appearances from American celebrities like Bing Crosby and Dinah Shore. Shore joined Miller at Abbey Road Studios for recording sessions, where they created German-language programs for broadcasting to enemy lines. The band's music resonated with military personnel across all ranks, and their concert at the 8th Air Force headquarters was even filmed by the American Forces Network. General James H. Doolittle, commander of the 8th Air Force, praised the band's impact, stating, "Next to a letter from home, your band is the greatest morale booster in the European theater." This highlighted the profound effect of music in lifting spirits and fostering unity during wartime. In November 1944, Miller and his commanding officer, David Niven, got approval to move the band from England to France. They hoped Paris would be a better base for their radio broadcasts and provide opportunities to perform for wounded soldiers in hospitals and troops on leave. Before the move, however, they had to pre-record an enormous 80 hours of broadcasts, which added to their already busy schedule. Frustration grew as preparations in France lagged. So to speed things up, Niven instructed Miller to replace his executive officer, Lieutenant Donald Haynes, and travel to Paris ahead of the rest of the band to finalize the arrangements. How then did this trip turn into a nightmare and historic horror? Keep watching to find out. The beginning of Glenn's doom. After completing their pre-recordings and broadcasts on December 12, 1944, Glenn Miller and his band were set to travel to France. Miller had a flight booked from London to Paris on December 14th, but bad weather caused the flight to be cancelled. Eager to get his band to France and worried about potential delays, Miller was frustrated. In a twist of fate, Miller learned from his colleague Jerry Gray that Lieutenant Colonel Norman Bessel was scheduled to fly to France on December 15th aboard a Norduen UC-64A Norseman. Bessel offered Miller a seat on the flight. Although Miller's travel orders didn't authorize him to fly on this type of plane, he accepted the offer. This decision would have dire consequences. Miller did not inform his chain of command about the change in his travel plans, which meant that SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, was unaware of his new itinerary. On December 15th, the Norseman took off from RAF Twinwood Farm with Basel, Miller, and pilot John Stuart Morgan on board. Tragically, the plane never reached its destination and disappeared without a trace. The following day, the Battle of the Bulge began, and the chaos of the war overshadowed the disappearance of the small aircraft and its 3 passengers. It wasn't until December 18th that the 8th Air Force and SHAEF realized the plane carrying Glenn Miller was missing. The mystery of Miller's disappearance would go on to puzzle investigators for many years. The official explanation for the disappearance is poor weather conditions. Dense fog and low cloud cover had grounded flights for days, and the weather in France was no better. Pilot John Morgan had requested to delay the flight due to poor visibility, but French air controllers denied the request. Lieutenant Colonel Bessel, however, overruled the controllers and insisted that Morgan proceed with the flight, hoping to ensure Miller would arrive in Paris on time. Miller, who was already apprehensive about flying, reportedly asked, "Where the hell are the parachutes?" To which Bessel responded, "What's the matter, Miller? Do you want to live forever?" This exchange only heightened the tension and foreshadowed the tragedy that followed. Speculation about the cause of the plane's disappearance has arisen over the years. Some believe that the decision to fly despite hazardous conditions was a key factor. Additionally, there is evidence suggesting that pilot John Morgan might not have been fully qualified to fly the Norseman solely by instruments. This lack of expertise could have led to spatial disorientation, a dangerous situation where pilots lose their sense of direction and altitude, particularly in thick clouds. Flight simulations show that a pilot has only 178 seconds to correct spatial disorientation before disaster occurs, meaning Morgan may have had very little time to regain control once disoriented. Further complicating the mystery, the Norseman aircraft used during the 1940s was known for carburetor issues, which could lead to engine failure. Freezing temperatures at high altitudes could also cause ice to form on the wings, adding to the potential for an accident. The combination of these factors might have contributed to the tragic loss of the plane and its passengers. In the wake of Miller's disappearance, rumors spread quickly, ranging from enemy fire to secret missions gone wrong. Some speculated that the plane was accidentally struck by friendly fire during a bomb run over the channel, while others believed Miller may have been involved in covert intelligence work. None of these theories were ever confirmed, leaving only questions in their place. For decades, friends, family, and fans held on to hope that one day the truth would emerge. Despite the lack of closure, Glenn Miller's music never faded. His recordings, from In the Mood to Moonlight Serenade, became timeless reminders of a man who gave everything he had to lift the spirits of others in a time of global darkness. His final flight remains one of the greatest aviation mysteries of the 20th century, a haunting testament to the risks of war and the lasting legacy of a man who disappeared but was never forgotten. Now, let's take a look at some of the speculations surrounding his disappearance. Friendly fire theory. While the weather conditions were certainly a factor in Glenn Miller's disappearance, a disturbing theory suggests that friendly fire might have played a role. On the day Miller's plane went missing, a large bombing raid over Germany had to be called off due to heavy fog. As the Lancaster bombers returned from their failed mission, they reached a point where they needed to drop their unused bombs into a designated jettison area in the English Channel. Navigator Fred Shaw, observing from his bomber, noticed the bombs falling into the sea and, out of curiosity, looked around. He spotted a small plane flying 2,500 feet below the Lancaster formation, heading south. Shaw watched in horror as the plane seemed to struggle, then suddenly flipped and fell into the channel. His bombardier also saw the same event, and the rear gunner reported over the intercom, "There's a kite just gone in, down under." However, since the crew was not in enemy territory at that moment, they were not debriefed after their return, and the sighting was never officially reported. The plane crash theory. Years later, in 1956, Fred Shaw watched the film The Glenn Miller Story and had a chilling realization. He wondered if the small plane he had seen crash into the sea during the war might have been the one carrying Glenn Miller. Shaw checked his logbook and found that the date and location matched Miller's disappearance. The theory suggests that Miller's plane was following a standard shuttle route used by Allied forces to travel to France, which brought it dangerously close to the South Jettison area, a no-fly zone for unauthorized aircraft. With pilot John Morgan's lack of experience in instrument flying and the poor visibility due to the fog, it's possible that Miller's plane accidentally strayed off course into the path of the returning bombers. This could have led to it being struck by the bombs jettisoned by the Lancasters. However, this theory is not without its critics. Roy Brown, a Lancaster veteran from that raid, has cast doubt on the possibility of friendly fire. Brown argued that the conditions during the mission, poor visibility and the chaos of the bombing raid, made it highly unlikely for anyone to accurately identify a small plane like Miller's. With over 100 aircraft involved and dense cloud cover, Brown believed it would have been nearly impossible to spot such a small plane from a distance and at different altitudes. He also noted the significant altitude difference between the Lancasters and Miller's plane, which would have made it improbable for a bomb to hit the smaller aircraft. What other theories remain about Glenn's flight? Keep watching to find out. Glenn's absence on the flight theory, an alternative theory which has intrigued conspiracy theorists and history enthusiasts, suggests that Glenn Miller might not have been on the ill-fated flight at all. In 1997, German journalist Udo Ulfkotte made a startling claim, alleging that he had found secret government documents revealing a different story about Miller's death. According to Ulfkotte, instead of dying in a plane crash, Miller supposedly passed away in a Paris brothel from a heart attack while with a prostitute. Ulfkotte, known for his controversial opinions and conspiracy theories, claimed he discovered these documents while researching for a book about the band, the German intelligence agency. He suggested that the real circumstances of Miller's death were covered up to protect his reputation and maintain troop morale. However, following his sensational interview with a German tabloid, Ulfkotte changed his story. He said he had been misquoted and never had the documents he initially claimed to possess. Instead, he revised his account, stating that an off-duty BND agent had shared this version of events with him. This retraction cast serious doubt on the validity of his claims. While it is indeed odd that Miller's disappearance wasn't reported until 9 days after the alleged crash, there is no concrete evidence to support Ulfkotte's sensational theory. The official explanation, which holds that Miller's plane was lost in the English Channel, remains the most widely accepted and plausible account. Despite the intriguing nature of the alternative theory, it remains unsubstantiated, and the official narrative continues to be the most credible explanation of Miller's fate. There is also another theory that Glenn was on a spy mission. Keep watching to know more. Glenn's spy mission theory and encounter with the Nazis. The idea that Glenn Miller, the famous band leader, might have been a spy for the Allies during World War II is a fascinating one. Miller's involvement in counter-propaganda efforts against the Nazis adds weight to this theory. He spoke fluent German and used his broadcasts to deliver messages of hope and resistance to German listeners. Interestingly, actor David Niven, who was also involved in covert operations, appeared in these broadcasts. Niven was part of Phantom, a special reconnaissance unit, and such involvement of entertainers in covert activities was not uncommon during the war. One particularly intriguing theory suggests that Miller's mission in France went beyond just performing concerts. According to Dr. James B. Conant, a former U.S. ambassador, Miller was actually acting as a diplomat. His supposed task was to meet with high-ranking German generals, such as Hermann Göring and Gerd von Rundstedt, to negotiate a peace deal with the Allies. Conant even speculates that Miller was given authority to offer sanctuary to Wernher von Braun. the renowned rocket scientist who later contributed to the U.S. space program. According to this theory, Miller's disappearance was not a mere accident, but a deliberate sabotage by the Nazis aimed at preventing peace negotiations. Conant's narrative ties Miller's alleged mission to a Parisian brothel, which supposedly served as a cover for Nazi operations. The story claims that Miller was secretly transported to this brothel, where he was murdered while unconscious. However, this theory is based on scant evidence. Aside from some circumstantial accounts, there is little concrete proof to support the idea that Miller was in a brothel or met such a grim fate. One account from an unidentified British soldier mentioned seeing an American officer's body being taken out of a brothel and identified as Major Glenn Miller. Yet, this story has largely been dismissed as unsubstantiated or a case of mistaken identity. Now, a promising new lead might finally solve the mystery of Glenn Miller's disappearance. What is it? Keep watching to find out. Tigar confirms our suspicions. 80 years later, Glenn Miller's plane was finally found. In January 2019, Rick Gillespie from TIGAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, brought forward an intriguing development. According to Gillespie, an English fisherman might have unknowingly discovered the wreckage of Miller's plane back in 1987. The fisherman was trolling in the English Channel when he came across debris from an aircraft. He contacted the Coast Guard, who advised him to dispose of it if it was from World War II, as it could be a war grave. Years later, the fisherman saw a photo of Miller's Norseman aircraft and realized that the debris he had found might be significant. He had recorded the location where he had discarded the wreckage, which now provides a potential lead for investigators. Gillespie, who has considerable experience in aircraft recovery, finds this lead credible. He notes that Miller's plane was the only Norseman of its kind to disappear during the war, which would make it easier to identify the wreckage if it is found. This new information offers a hopeful chance to uncover the truth about Miller's disappearance and potentially bring closure to a long-standing mystery. While the investigation is ongoing, the possibility of locating the wreckage and solving the case provides excitement for history enthusiasts and fans of Glenn Miller's music. Until then, the story of Miller's disappearance remains an intriguing puzzle, sparking curiosity and speculation about the fate of the legendary band leader. If the wreckage is ever conclusively identified, it would mark the end of one of World War II's most enduring mysteries. But even beyond solving the puzzle of his final moments, such a discovery would serve as a tribute to Glenn Miller's legacy, a man who left behind fame and fortune to boost morale on the front lines. His disappearance was not just the loss of a beloved band leader, but of a symbol of hope for millions during one of the darkest chapters in human history. For decades, fans have clung to fragments of information haunted by what-ifs and maybes. Now, with new technology and renewed interest, there is a glimmer of hope that the truth may finally surface. Whether found beneath the waters of the English Channel or etched into the memories of those he inspired, Glenn Miller's story remains deeply woven into the soul of American history and music. Why Glenn Miller's disappearance still matters. Glenn Miller wasn't just another missing person from wartime history. He was a symbol of American resilience, creativity, and hope. When his plane vanished over the English Channel in 1944, it wasn't just a military loss. It felt personal to millions. At the peak of his fame, Miller had walked away from commercial success to serve his country, using his music to boost the morale of Allied troops during World War II. His disappearance left a void not only in the music world, but in the hearts of a nation that had come to rely on his melodies in dark times. That's why every new clue, every possible piece of wreckage, reignites global interest. The search for answers is more than a historical footnote. It's a quest to honor a legacy that blended art, service, and patriotism. And as new evidence comes to light, one question continues to echo. What really happened to Glenn Miller on that fateful flight? Do you think the found plane will unravel the puzzle of Glenn's death? Which of the theories do you believe more? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.